This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This reading by Deborah Lynn in February 2007. Grandma Keeler Gets Grandpa Ready for Sunday School by Sarah P. McLean Green. Sunday morning nothing arose in Wallencamp save the sun. At least that celestial orb had long forgotten all the roseate flaming of his youth in an honest, straightforward march through the heavens ere the first signs of smoke came curling lazily up from the Wallencamp chimneys. I had retired at night very weary, with the delicious consciousness that it wouldn't make any difference when I woke up the next morning, or whether indeed I woke at all. So I opened my eyes leisurely and lay half dreaming, half meditating on a variety of things. I deciphered a few of the texts on the scriptural patchwork quilt which covered my couch. There were, "Let not your heart be troubled," "Remember Lot's wife," and "Philander Keeler," traced in inky hieroglyphics, all in close conjunction. Finally I reached out for my watch, and having ascertained the time of day, I got up and proceeded to dress hastily enough, wondering to hear no signs of life in the house. I went noiselessly down the stairs. All was silent below, except for the peaceful snoring of Mrs. Philander and the little Keelers, which was responded to from some remote western corner of the ark by the triumphant snores of Grandma and Grandpa Keeler. I attempted to kindle a fire in the stove, but it sizzled a little while, spitefully, as much as to say, "What, Sunday morning? Not I!" and went out. So I concluded to put on some wraps and go out and warm myself in the sun. I climbed the long hill back of the ark, descended, and walked along the bank of the river. It was a beautiful morning. The air was everything that could be desired in the way of air, but I felt a desperate need of something more substantial. Standing alone with nature on the bank of the lovely river, I thought, with tears in my eyes, of the delicious breakfast already recuperating the exhausted energies of my far-away home friends. When I got back to the house, Mrs. Philander, in simple and unaffected attire, was bustling busily about the stove. The snores from Grandma and Grandpa's quarter had ceased, signifying that they also had advanced a stage in the grand processes of Sunday morning. The children came teasing me to dress them, so I fastened for them a variety of small articles, which I flattered myself on having combined in a very ingenious and artistic manner, though I believe those infant Keelers went weeping to Grandma afterward, and were remodelled by her all-comforting hand with much skill and patience. In the midst of her preparations for breakfast, Madeline abruptly assumed her hat and shawl, and was seen from the window walking leisurely across the field in the direction of the woods. She returned in due time, bearing an armful of fresh evergreens, which she twisted around the family register. When the ancient couple made their appearance, I remarked silently in regard to Grandma Keeler's hair what proved afterward to be its usual holiday morning arrangement. It was confined in 6 infinitesimal braids, which appeared to be sprouting out perpendicularly in all directions from her head. The effect of redundancy and expansiveness thus heightened and increased on Grandma's features was striking in the extreme. While we were eating breakfast, that good soul observed to Grandpa Keeler, "Wall, Pa, I s'pose y'all be ready when the time comes to take Teacher and me over to West Wallen to Sunday school, won't you?" Grandpa coughed and coughed again, and raised his eyes helplessly to the window. "Looks some like showers," said he. "Ahem! Looks mightily to me like showers over yonder." "La, really, husband, I must say I feel mortified for you," said Grandma, "seeing as you're a perfessor, too, and thar ain't been a single Sunday morning since I've lived with you, Pa, summer or winter, but what you've seen showers, and it really seems to me it's dreadful inconsistent when thar ain't no cloud in the sky, and don't look no more like rain than I do." And Grandma's face, in spite of her reproachful tones, was, above all, blandly sunlike and expressive of anything rather than deluge and watery disaster. Grandpa was silent a little while, then coughed again. I had never seen Grandpa in worse straits. Fanny seems to be a little lame this morning, said he. I shouldn't wonder. She's been going pretty stiddy this week. It does beat all, Pa, continued Grandma Keeler, how to all the horses you've ever had since I've known you have always been took lame on Sunday morning. There was Happy Jack. He could go anywheres through the week and never limp a step as nobody could see. And Sunday morning he was always took lame. And there was Tantrum. Tantrum was the horse that had run away with Grandma when she was thrown from the wagon and generally smashed to pieces. And now Grandma branched off into the thrilling reminiscences connected with this incident of her life, which was the third time during the week that the horrible tale had been repeated for my delectation. When she had finished, Grandpa shook his head with painful earnestness, reverting to the former subject of discussion. "It's a long jaunt," said he, "a long jaunt. Thar's a long hill to climb before we reach Zion's Mount," said Grandma Keeler impressively. "Wall, there's a darn sight harder one on the road to West Wallen," burst out the old sea captain desperately. "Say nothin' about the devilish stones." "Thar now," said Grandma, with calm though awful reproof. "I think we've gone fur enough for one day. We've broke the Sabbath and took the name of the Lord in vain, and that ought to be enough for professors." Grandpa replied at length in a greatly subdued tone, "Wall, if you and the teacher want to go over to Sunday school today, I s'pose we can go if we get ready." A long submissive sigh. "I s'pose we can." "They have preachin' service in the mornin', I suppose," said Grandma, "but we don't generally git along to that. It makes such an early start. We generally try to get around when we go in time for Sunday school. They have singin' and all. It's just about as interestin', I think, as preachin'. The old man really likes it," she observed aside to me, "when he once gets started, but he kind of dreads the gettin' started." When I beheld the ordeal through which Grandpa Keeler was called to pass at the hands of his faithful consort before he was considered in a fit condition of mind and body to embark for the sanctuary, I marveled not at the old man's reluctance, nor that he had indeed seen clouds and tempest fringing the horizon. Immediately after breakfast he set out for the barn, ostensibly to see to the chores, really, I believe, to obtain a few moments' respite before worse evil should come upon him. Pretty soon Grandma was at the back door, calling in firm though persuasive tones, "Husband, husband, come in now and get ready." No answer. Then it was in another key, weighty, yet expressive of no weak irritation, that Grandma called, "Come, Pa! Pa! Pa!" Still no answer. But then that voice of Grandma's sung out like a trumpet, terrible with meaning, "By Jonah Keeler!" But Grandpa appeared not. Next I saw Grandma slowly but surely gravitating in the direction of the barn, and soon she returned, bringing with her that ancient delinquent who looked like a lost sheep indeed, and a truly unreconciled one. "Now the first thing," said Grandma, looking her forlorn captive over, "is boots. Go and get on your meetin' gaiters, Pa." The old gentleman, having dutifully invested himself with those sacred relics, came pathetically limping into the room. "I declare, Ma," said he, "somehow these things, whew! Somehow they pinch my feet dreadfully. I don't know what it is. Whew! They're dreadful uncomfortable things somehow." "Since I've known you, Pa," solemnly ejaculated Grandma Keeler, "you've never had a pair of meetin' boots that set easy on your feet. You'd ought to get boots big enough for you, Pa," she continued, looking down disapprovingly on the old gentleman's pedal extremities, which resembled two small scows at anchor in black cloth encasements, "and not be so proud as to go to pinching your feet into gaiters a number of sizes too small for you." "They're number 10s, I tell you," roared Grandpa, nettled outrageously by this cutting taunt. "Well, thar now, Pa," said Grandma soothingly, "if I had such feet as that, I wouldn't go to spreading it all over town, if I was you. But it's time we stopped bickerin' now, husband, and got ready for meetin'. So sit down and let me wash your head." "I've washed once this mornin'. It's clean enough," Grandpa protested, but in vain. He was planted in a chair, and Grandma Keeler, with rag and soap and a basin of water, attacked the old gentleman vigorously, much as I have seen cruel mothers wash the faces of their earth-begrimed infants. He only gave expression to such groans as, "Thar, Ma, don't tear my ears to pieces. Come, Ma, you got my eyes so full of soap now, Ma, that I can't see nothing. Whew, Lordy, ain't she most through with this, Ma?" Then came the dyeing process, which Grandma Keeler assured me aside made Grandpa look like a man of 30. But to me, after it, he looked neither old nor young, human nor inhuman, nor like anything that I had ever seen before under the sun. "Thar's the lotion, the potion, the dyer, and the setter," said Grandma, pointing to 4 bottles on the table. "Now, whar's the directions, Madeline?" These having been produced from between the leaves of the family Bible, Madeline read, while Grandma made a vigorous practical application of the various mixtures. "This admirable lotion," in soft ecstatic tones Madeline rehearsed the flowery language of the recipe, "though not so instantaneously startling in its effect as our inestimable dyer and setter, yet forms the most essential part of the whole process, opening, as it does, the dry and lifeless pores of the scalp, imparting to them new life and beauty, and rendering them more easily susceptible to the applications which follow. But we must go deeper than this. A tone must be given to the whole system by means of the cleansing and rejuvenating of the very center of our beings, and for this purpose we have prepared our wonderful potion." Here Grandpa, with a wry face, was made to swallow a spoonful of the mixture. "Our unparalleled dyer," Madeline continued, "restores black hair to a more than original gloss and brilliancy, and gives to the faded golden tress the sunny flashes of youth." Grandpa was dyed. "Our world-renowned setter completes and perfects the whole process by adding tone and permanency to the efficacious qualities of the lotion, potion, and dyer, etc." While on Grandpa's head the unutterable die was set. "Now read teacher some of the testimonials, daughter," said Grandma Keeler, whose face was one broad, generous illustration of that rare and peculiar virtue called faith. So Madeline continued. "Mrs. Hiram Briggs of North Dedham writes, 'I was terribly afflicted with baldness, so that for months I was little more than an outcast from society, and an object of pity to my most familiar friends. I tried every remedy in vain. At length I heard of your wonderful restorative. After a week's application, my hair had already begun to grow in what seemed the most miraculous manner. At the end of 10 months it had assumed such length and proportions as to be a most luxurious burden, and where I had before been regarded with pity and aversion, I became the envied and admired of all beholders.'" "Just think," said Grandma Keeler, with rapturous sympathy and gratitude, "how that poor creature must have felt." "Orion Spaulding of Weedsville, Vermont," Madeline went on, but here I had to beg to be excused, and went to my room to get ready for the Sunday school. When I came down again, Grandpa Keeler was seated, completely arrayed in his best clothes, opposite Grandma, who held the big family Bible in her lap, and a Sunday school question book in one hand. "Now, Pa," said she, "what tribe was it in sacred writ that wore bunnets?" I was compelled to infer, from the tone of Grandpa Keeler's answer, that his temper had not undergone a mollifying process during my absence. "Come, Ma," said he, "how much longer you going to pester me in this way?" "Why, Pa," Grandma rejoined calmly, "until you get a proper understanding of it. What tribe was it in sacred writ that wore bunnets?" "Lordy!" exclaimed the old man, "how do you suppose I know? They must have been a tarnal old womanish-looking set, anyway." "The tribe of Judah, Pa," said Grandma gravely. "Now, how good it is, husband, to have your understanding all freshened up on the Scripters." "Come, come, Ma," said Grandpa, rising nervously, "it's time we was startin'. When I make up my mind to go anywhere, I always want to get there in time. If I was going to the Old Harry, I should want to get there in time." "It's my consarn that we shall all get thar before time, some on us," said Grandma with sad meaning, "unless we learn to use more respectful language." I shall never forget how we set off for church that Sabbath morning, way out at one of the sunny back doors of the Ark, for there was Madeline's little cottage that fronted the highway, or lane, and then there was a long backward extension of the Ark, only 1 story in height. This belonged peculiarly to Grandma and Grandpa Keeler. It contained the parlor and 3 keepin' rooms, opening one into the other, all of the same size and general bare and gloomy appearance, all possessing the same sacredly preserved atmosphere, through which we passed with becoming silence and solemnity into the end room, the sunny kitchen where Grandma and Grandpa kept house by themselves in the summer time. And there at the door, her very yellow coat reflecting the rays of the sun, stood Fanny, presenting about as much appearance of life and animation as a pensive summer squash. The carriage, I thought, was a facsimile of the one in which I had been brought from West Wallen on the night of my arrival. One of the most striking peculiarities of this sort of vehicle was the width at which the wheels were set apart. The body seemed comparatively narrow. It was very long and covered with white canvas. It had neither windows nor doors, but just the one guarded opening in front. There were no steps leading to this, and indeed a variety of obstacles before it. And the way Grandma effected an entrance was to put a chair on a mound of earth and a cricket on top of the chair, and thus, having climbed up to Fanny's reposeful back, she slipped passively down, feet foremost, to the whiffle-tree. From thence she easily gained the plane of the carriage floor. Grandpa and I took a less circuitous, though perhaps not less difficult, route. I sat with Grandpa on the front seat. It may be remarked that the front seat was very much front, and the back seat was very much back. There was a kind of wooden shelf built outside as a resting place for the feet, so that while our heads were under cover, our feet were out, utterly exposed to the weather, and we must either lay them on the shelf or let them hang off into space. Madeline and the children stood at the door to see us off. "All aboard! Ship ballasted! Wind fa'r! Go ahead thar, Fanny!" shouted Grandpa, who seemed quite restored in spirits, and held the reins and wielded the whip with a masterful air. He spun sea yarns, too, all the way, marvelous ones, and Grandma's reproving voice was mellowed by the distance, and so confusedly mingled with the rumbling of the wheels that it seemed hardly to reach him at all. Not that Grandma looked discomforted on this account, or in bad humor. On the contrary, as she sat back there in the ghostly shadows with her hands folded and her hair combed out in resplendent waves on either side of her head, she appeared conscious that every word she uttered was taking root in some obdurate heart. She was in every respect the picture of good-will and contentment. But the face under Grandpa's antiquated beaver began to give me a fresh shock every time I looked up at him, for the light and the air were rapidly turning his rejuvenated locks and his poor thin fringe of whiskers to an unnatural greenish tint, while his bushy eyebrows, untouched by the hand of art, shone as white as ever. In spite of the old sea captain's entertaining stories, it seemed indeed a long jaunt to West Wallen. To say that Fanny was a slow horse would be but a feeble expression of the truth. A persevering click, click, click began to arise from Grandma's quarter. This annoyed Grandpa exceedingly. "Shet up, Ma!" he was moved to exclaim at last. "I'm steering this craft." Click, click, click came perseveringly from behind. "Dum it, Ma! Thar, Ma!" cried Grandpa, exasperated beyond measure. "How's this hoss going to hear anything I say if you keep up such eternal cacklin'?" Just as we were coming out of the thickest part of the woods, about a mile beyond Wallencamp, we discovered a man walking in the distance. It was the only human being we had seen since we started. "Hullo, there's Lovell!" exclaimed Grandpa. "I was wonderin' why we hadn't overtook him before. We generally take him in on the road. Yes, yes, that's Lovell, ain't it, teacher?" I put up my glasses helplessly. "I'm sure," I said, "I can't tell positively. I have seen Mr. Barlow but once, and at that distance I shouldn't know my own father." "Must be Lovell," said Grandpa. "Yes, I know him. Hullo thar! Ship ahoy! Ship ahoy!" Grandpa's voice suggested something of the fire and vigor it must have had when it rang out across the foam of waves and pierced the tempest's roar. The man turned and looked at us, and then went on again. "He don't seem to recognize us," said Grandma. "Ship ahoy! Ship ahoy!" shouted Grandpa. The man turned and looked at us again, and this time he stopped and kept on looking. When we got up to him we saw that it wasn't Lovell Barlow at all, but a stranger of trampish appearance, drunk and fiery and fixed in an aggressive attitude. I was naturally terrified. What if he should attack us in that lonely spot? Grandpa was so old, and moreover Grandpa was so taken aback to find that it wasn't Lovell that he began some blunt and stammering expression of surprise which only served to increase the stranger's ire. Grandma, imperturbable soul, who never failed to come to the rescue even in the most desperate emergencies, Grandma climbed over to the front, thrust out her benign head, and said in that deep, calm voice of hers, "We're going to the house of God, brother. Won't you get in and go too?" "No," our brother replied, doubling up his fists and shaking them menacingly in our faces. "I won't go to no house of God. What do you mean by overhauling me on the road and asking me to get into your damned old traveling lunatic asylum?" "Drive on, Pa," said Grandma coldly. "He ain't in no condition to be labored with now. Drive on kind o' quick." Kind o' quick we could not go, but Fanny was made to do her best, and we did not pause to look behind. When we got to the church, Sunday school had already begun. There was Lovell Barlow, looking preternaturally stiff in his best clothes, sitting with a class of young men. He saw us when we came in, and gave me a look of deep meaning. It was the same expression, as though there was some solemn mutual understanding between us, which he had worn on that night when he gave me his picture. "There's plenty of young folks' classes," said Grandma, "but seeing as we're late, maybe you'd just as soon go right along in with us." I said that I should like that best, so I went into the old folks' class with Grandma and Grandpa Keeler. There were 3 pews of old people in front of us, and the teacher, who certainly seemed to me the oldest person I had ever seen, sat in an otherwise vacant pew in front of all, so that, his voice being very thin and querulous, we could hear very little that he said, although we were edified in some faint sense by his pious manner of shaking his head and rolling his eyes toward the ceiling. The church was a square wooden edifice of medium size, and contained 3 stoves, all burning brightly. Against this, and the drowsy effect of their long drive in the sun and wind, my 2 companions proved powerless to struggle. Grandpa looked furtively up at Grandma, then endeavored to put on, as a sort of apology for what he felt was inevitably coming, a sanctimonious expression which was most unnatural to him, and which soon faded away as the sweet unconsciousness of slumber overspread his features. His head fell back helplessly, his mouth opened wide. He snored, but not very loudly. I looked at Grandma, wondering why her vigilance had failed on this occasion, and lo, her head was falling peacefully from side to side. She was fast asleep too. She woke up first, however, and then Grandpa was speedily and adroitly aroused by some means, I think it was a pin, and Grandma fed him with bits of unsweetened flag root, which he munched penitently, though evidently without relish, until he dropped off to sleep again, and she dropped off to sleep again, and so they continued. But it always happened that Grandma woke up first, and whereas Grandpa, when the avenging pin pierced his shins, recovered himself with a start and an air of guilty confusion, Grandma opened her eyes at regular intervals, with the utmost calm and placidity, as though she had merely been closing them to engage in a few moments of silent prayer. End of Grandma Keeler Gets Grandpa Ready for Sunday School by Sarah P. McLean Green.